1 year ago today, an indie horror visual novel called Slay the Princess hit Steam, and it's since spread across the gaming circle like wildfire. It started gaining traction so quickly, and for extremely good reason. The art is gorgeous, the story is compelling, the music is phenomenal, and the writing. Don't even get me started on how beautiful this game's writing is. Y'all, this game is really good. Like, really, really good. Amazing, even. I can't begin to express my love for Slay the Princess and how it's inspired my own creative work over the past year. But you're watching a speed paint, and I promised commentary, so I'll do my best to cover the base points of why I love this game and what I think makes it so good. AKA, I'm about to yap about one of my interests, and you're about to listen. Yippee! I'll also talk a little bit later about this drawing you're watching and what made me decide on this particular composition. Also, throughout the speed paint, you may see me import screenshots from the game as reference material to help me. Just going to say right out of the gate that I hold no claim to those, only to my own drawing. All credits for reference images used go to Black Tabby Games. Now then, allow me to present you with a brief synopsis of the plot of Slay the Princess. Slay the Princess is a game about choice and about perspective. You're told from the very beginning that you need to slay a princess. The game's title says it. The narrator character in-game says it. You're told that you're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin, and in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're told that the world will end if you don't slay her. But you don't have to slay her. From the moment you step inside that cabin, you're given a choice to take a blade to slay her, or continue downstairs without a blade. And from there, you think, alright, so I have two options, and I've chosen the one I want to go with. Cool, let's see how this goes. But the choices don't stop there. That first interaction with the princess has multiple different ways it can end, both when you have the blade with you and when you don't. And once you reach an ending, whether it's through doing what you're told and slaying her, or through any other number of choices, the story isn't over. Your character wakes back up on that path in the woods with a new voice in his head and a narrator who doesn't remember anything about the previous loop. Strange, right? But that's not the only strange thing. Upon getting to the cabin the second time, you notice that things are changing. The interior of the cabin will look different. It may look more ruined and dilapidated or more grand and towering. You'll start seeing mirrors that the narrator insists aren't actually there. And the princess will be much different too, all depending on what choices you made in that very first encounter with her. All depending on how you viewed her at the end of said encounter. All depending on your perspective. And when you think the game's over, when you think you've reached the end, well, that's when the story is just beginning. It's at this point in the video that I'm going to give a spoiler warning for the game, because the stuff I'm going to talk about next will be spoiler territory. If you haven't played the game yet and liked the sound of the overview I just gave you, go play it. I promise you won't regret it. In fact, wait a day and play it tomorrow when the pristine cut comes out. The game is getting an absolutely massive free DLC, and even the devs have said that if you're a new player and can wait until pristine cut, then you should wait. Regardless, this video will still be here when you've beaten the game. It only takes about 3 or 4 hours to do it. But anyway, I've said my piece and given my warning. Time to keep this ramble train going. One thing that really makes this game stand out for me is the sheer amount of choice involved. I haven't even begun to cover the vast amount of branching paths that this game has to offer. Everyone's first experience with Slay the Princess will be different, which gives a really personalized feeling to the game. My first princess, or vessel if you will, aside from the base princess you meet in Chapter 1, was the Nightmare. And let me tell you, there is nothing quite as unsettling as experiencing that route late at night with all of the lights around me shut off. I booted up the game and immediately landed myself on what was easily the most frightening out of all the routes for me. And of all the playthroughs I've watched, all the times I've played it for friends, nobody else I've seen has gotten Nightmare first. Everyone has a different experience with their first princess. No two playthroughs will be the same. And that's one of the biggest joys of the game for me. How much choice is involved and how much your actions affect the story. Your choices don't just affect you either. Like I said before, this game is about perspective. The princess is a being built around perspective. She changes depending on how she's seen by your player character. and this is obvious from the moment you meet her in Chapter 1. Depending on whether you take the blade or not, the princess's entire personality and demeanor towards you will change. If you take the blade, and therefore recognize her as a threat to you and to the world, her tone will be colder towards you. She'll seem more threatening because you perceive her as threatening. But if you don't take the blade and don't see her as a threat, she'll be much sweeter and more timid, like a damsel in distress. But any choice you make in Chapter 1 can cause her demeanor to change once again. It's all based on how you view her and react to her. How you see her at the end of Chapter 1 will determine how she changes and behaves in Chapter 2. If at the end of the chapter you view her as a caged animal, then the princess you see in Chapter 2 will be a literal beast. If you see her as powerful and towering, able to kill you with ease, then that's what she'll be. If you see her as a perfect damsel, that's what she'll become. She is constantly changing according to your perspective. And it makes so much sense when you realize that she literally represents change. It's honestly genius writing. And the music even reflects this. Every song in the game ties back to that first track you hear at the beginning, carrying the same leitmotifs throughout, but changing and growing depending on how the story develops. The music reflects the princess and the routes you take, but at its core it all connects. I could talk on and on about the music, but I really don't think my words alone could do the brilliant soundtrack of this game justice. Just know that the threads which tie the story together are also present in the music, because, come on, how cool is that? And when the story comes to a peak, when you meet the shifting mound face to face, and you see all of the pieces of her that you've met during the story, that's when the experience is really tied together for me. The game takes you back through your choices, through your perspectives, and shows them to you from a new angle. Your choices through the whole game will come back to you. Then, at the very end of the game, when you reach the heart of the shifting mound, you're taken back to where it started. You're given the same choice you were given at the very start. Take the blade, or don't. And when you go downstairs and see her one last time, her behavior in that final meeting will reflect her behavior when you first saw her. It all comes full circle from start to end. I'll be honest, I was not expecting Slay the Princess to go the direction that it did. The game tells you from the start what you'd expect the story to be. Go to the cabin and slay the princess. But it's so much more than that. Beyond the woods and the cabin is an overarching narrative that tackles something very real. The innate human fear of death and change. It presents you with an honestly very philosophical question. Is an eternity without death, and therefore the capacity to change, better than a world doomed to end someday? Is a stagnant universe better than a changing one? And the game doesn't answer the question. Not solidly, anyway. In the end, it's up to you to find an answer for yourself. This game presents you with very heavy, but very real questions about the nature of change. It makes you think. It also takes the vague concepts of everything and nothing, personifies them, and says, what if we made them kiss? And I think that's beautiful too. Your player character, also known as the Long Quiet, and the princess, or the Shifting Mound, are two halves of a whole. In nothing exists everything, and in everything exists nothing. It's the ultimate love story. And at the end of the day, that's what this game is. A love story. A really messed up love story, mind you, but a love story nonetheless. This drawing that you're watching, I've been wanting to make it for about a year now, ever since I first played the game. It's inspired by a very specific line that the Shifting Mound says when you meet her. When the echo spun us from one into two, he gave you a choice and me a role to play. Essentially, she's talking about the moment when the narrator, or what was left of him at the time, pulled apart the Shifting Mound and the Long Quiet in order to try and rid the world of death, put them inside of his construct and built this never-ending narrative, made a god that represents nothing try to kill a god that represents everything. And that's what I wanted to try and capture in this piece. The feeling of these two being pulled apart, made into their respective entities, no longer one whole, but instead two halves. The countless hands of the Shifting Mound pulling the princess down, and the woven texture of the Long Quiet pulling your hero upward. Reaching out for her, yet still holding onto the blade, showing the choice that you're bestowed, that you're burdened with. I've said it already, And I'll say it again, Slay the Princess is an incredible game and literary work. It has so much replayability with all the different routes and choices you won't see on your first run. The dialogue is witty and the characters are lovable beyond measure. It's one of those games that I wish I could just forget everything about, just so that I could go through and experience it for the first time all over again. Black Tabby Games, if you're watching, thank you so much for sharing your work with the world. And to everyone watching, thank you for sticking around and listening to me talk about this game. Feel free to tell me your experience in the comments. I'd love to know what your first route was and how your first run differed with my own. Please no pristine cut spoilers though, you know I'll be playing that the moment it releases. Once again, if you haven't played Slay the Princess, go check it out on Steam. Not sponsored, I just really love this game and want more people to know about it. I also hope you enjoyed the speed paint. This was my first time trying one with commentary, and I genuinely love to hear feedback. I don't often see speed paints where instead of talking about the piece and their artistic process, the artist talks about whatever media the fan art is for, so I wanted to try that. Let me know what you think and if you want to see more videos like this. I hope you watching have a good rest of your day or night, and happy anniversary to Slay the Princess!